tonight. I'm planning to go through the Upanishad, the rest. We have 6 other Upanishadic principles to cover tonight, and it doesn't actually take much time. It will take around actually 15 to 20 minutes, right? So because very few information is there to discuss, so I will go through that quickly, and I'm not going to from this point Vedic civilization will be, all the points will be covered, right? So, and our main next topic will be the Brahmanic culture, and I'm not going to start this tonight, that specific topic, as it is a very huge topic, and I'm going to give, I want to give it a fresh start, so I'm not going to start it by tonight. And what I'm planning to do is, once I finish discussing the rest 6, if I'm not mistaken, I think we have to go through around 6 principles. And once I finish that, I'm planning to give you an open book assessment, right? So hope you have idea about open book assessment. It is where you can answer the questions by reading your lecture notes, right? You could go through the lecture notes, and you could answer. I have 10 questions, right? Very short questions. You don't have very pointed questions. You don't have to explain that. Rather, you have to give the answer to the point, right? So very simple. Actually, I don't think that it will take 30 minutes to answer, but I will give you 30 minutes, and you can send me the answers around 9, right? So at 8:30, I'm going to finish the class, and the remaining 30 minutes you have to allocate for answering the questions, right? Right. So we are in the Upanishadic age, and this is the final part of the Vedic civilization, right? So if I give you a kind of summary, we are in the Vedic literature, right? So when we study, before that we studied about the Vedic civilization, right? So Vedic literature plays a vital role, because we could learn everything, not only about the religion, but also about their social activities, their political factors, their economical factors, and everything. We could learn, apart from the archaeological evidences, we could learn everything through this specific literature, right? So this Vedic literature plays a great role for us to learn more about the Vedic religion. Apart from those factors, all the people who are in the world, they could learn about the Vedic religion due to this, thankfully to the specific Vedic literature, right? So whenever we talk about the Vedic literature, there are 4 main great books, right? So we studied this again and again, right? So Rig Veda, Samaveda, Ajurveda, and Atharva Veda, right? So, and each and every of these book is composed with 4 great parts, right? 4 parts. Brahmanas, what are they?
Brahmana.
Can you remember?
Brahmana Samhitas are Aranyaka,
yeah.
Upanishad.
And Upanishad, yeah, right. So the first 3 parts we finished discussing during the class, and we are in our last topic, which is the Upanishad, right? So Upanishad, when we discuss about the Upanishad, we actually briefly studied about the Upanishad, like introduction, and within the Upanishad, we could find 13 principles, 13 Upanishad principles, right? So during last week, we finished discussing about 7, right? 7 Upanishad principles, and we have around 6 remaining, and today we will be going to cover those 6 principles, right? The first one that we are going to cover today is Aitareya Upanishad, right? So the pronunciations of these words are a bit difficult, right? So the pronunciation may be differ from one person to one person, because it is not our native language, right? So it doesn't matter, but try to remember the spellings for the words, right? So even I have given a descriptive introduction within your lecture notes, but I'm not going to talk each and every point here. Rather, I'm going to discuss the main points within the class, right? So the very first Upanishadic principle that we are going to talk about today is Aitareya Upanishad. Aitareya Upanishad, right? So it belongs to Rig Veda. Aitareya Upanishad, it belongs to Rig Veda. And it basically talks about it touches about the creation of life and life after the death. Aitareya Upanishad, it belongs to Rig Veda, and it talks about the or describe about within this specific principle, it describe about the creation of life and life after the death. Creation of life and life after the death. And apart from that, Aitareya Upanishad is famous for doctrine of Atman. Doctrine of Atman. It is famous for the doctrine of Atman, right? So and also so Aitareya Upanishad, it belongs to Rig Veda, and it deals with creation of life and life after the death. And also it is famous for doctrine of Atman. And apart from that, further, Aitareya Upanishad mentions three classes of men. Apart from that, it mentions three classes of men who wants to acquire the wisdom, who wants to aspire or acquire the wisdom, right? So the three classes are highest class, or the second, the highest or first class, second class, and third class, right? So those are the three classes. If you take the highest class, it consisted with those who turned away from the world and whose minds are free, right? So you just have to remember it talks about three classes of men, right? So the second group intends to achieve the knowledge by worshipping. They wants to achieve the knowledge by worshipping. And the third group, they cares about the worldly positions, especially by meditative worship, specifically through meditative worship, right? So Aitareya Upanishad, it belongs to Rig Veda, and it talks about the creation of life and life after the death. And also it is famous for doctrine of the Atman. And apart from that, it talks about three classes of men based on the way in which they acquire the wisdom, right? So the next Upanishad that we are going to talk tonight is Chandogya Upanishad. Chandogya Upanishad. It belongs to Samaveda. Chandogya Upanishad belongs to this principle, belongs to the Samaveda, and it is one of the oldest and best known Upanishad. Chandogya Upanishad is one of the oldest and best known Upanishad. And within Chandogya Upanishad also, it explains about the Om, right? So Om sound or syllable, it discusses about Om, right? So in our previous lecture also, we came through one Upanishadic principle which described about the Om. Can you remember what it was? Mandukya. Yeah, very good, right? So within the Mandukya Upanishad, they discussed about the Om, right? So Chando, I have this question within the question tonight, right? So which Upanishadic principles do you describe about the Om sound? So what are they? Chandogya Upanishad and the Mandukya Upanishad, right? So, and there is an interesting theory called cosmic egg theory, right? We are not going to learn that. Rather, there is that specific theory is well explained within the Chandogya Upanishad. That theory is explained within the Chandogya Upanishad, right? So the Chandogya Upanishad derives from Samaveda. It could be identified as one of the oldest and best known Upanishads among all the Upanishads, and it describes explained about the Om sound or syllable. And there is an interesting theory called cosmic egg theory that specific theory is well described within the Chandogya Upanishad principle, right? Right. The 10th Upanishadic principle that we are going to look at is the Bradaranyaka. It's a bit difficult to pronounce, right? So the Bradaranyaka Upanishad, and it belongs to Yajurveda. Bradaranyaka Upanishad, it belongs to Yajurveda, and this specific Upanishad it can be identified as the oldest and most important Upanishad amongst the all, right? So the previous one, it is one of the oldest and best known Upanishads, but the Bradaranyaka Upanishad, it is the oldest and the most important one. It is the oldest, right? So the previous one of the oldest, and the Bradaranyaka Upanishad could be identified as the oldest Upanishad amongst all the Upanishadic principles, right? So if you take the meaning of the Bradaranyaka, the name derives from the term the Great Forest Book. The Great Forest Book, right? So the name derives from the Great Forest Books, right? So, and when we talk about the Bradaranyaka Upanishad, it contains, within its explanation, it contains three main sections, three main khanda, sections or khandas. Another term, within the Bradaranyaka Upanishad, it contains three main sections or khandas, right? So what are they? The Madhukhanda, Munikhanda, and Khilakhanda. Madhukhanda, Munikhanda, and Khilakhanda, right? So Madhukhanda talks about the basic identity of the individual and universal, right? So Madhukhanda or the specific Madhukhanda or the section talks about basic identity of the individual and universal. And the second section is Munikhanda. Munikhanda or Yajnovalkya, another name is given for the second section. Munikhanda or Yajnovalkya section, both are same, right? So the specific section or was exposed by or talked by a great teacher, philosophical teacher called Yajnovalkya. Therefore, his name was given for this specific khanda, right? So, and within this section, it contains the dialogue in between that specific Yajnovalkya guru or sage and his wife. There in between dialogue is mentioned here or explained here within the Munikhanda. And the third part is the Khilakhanda, and it deals with the certain models of worship and meditation. Khilakhanda deals with certain models and worship of meditation, right? So the second group, which was the Munikhanda or Yajnovalkya Khanda, define three virtues, three cardinal virtues, which we could identify as 3 DAs, the 3 DAs, right? So alphabetical letters, DAs, 3 DAs, right? So why do we identify those three cordial virtues as 3 DAs? All three are starting from DA. The first one is Damana, Dana, Daya. Damana, Dana, and Daya, right? So all three words are starting with the letters DA. Due to that fact, it is briefly or shortly, for the convenience of understanding, it has given a name, 3 DAs. Damana is self-restraint. Dana is alms giving. Daya is compassion, right? So within the Yajnovalkya, it discusses about, described about these three cordial virtues or 3 DAs, right? So what are the 3 DAs? Self-restraint, Damana, alms giving, Dana, and compassion, Daya. Right, so that is about the Bradaranyaka Upanishad, right? So I think it is better for you to prepare a short note because it's a bit difficult to remember each and every point here. right? So preparing a short note will help you to remember the facts easily, I guess, right? So the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it belongs to Yajurveda, right? So it could be identified as one of the most important and oldest Upanishads, right? So if you take the meaning, the great forest book, we could identify three parts within these or sections or khandas within the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So what are they? Madhukanda, Munikanda, or Yajnavalkya Khanda and Kila Khanda, right? So Yajnavalkya Khanda, within the Yajnavalkya Khanda, there are three virtues are explained, or three DAs, right? So they are Damana, Dana, and Daya. If you take the English terms, self-restraint, almsgiving, and compassion, right? Right. The next Upanishad that we are going to look at is Shweta Shwetashvatara Upanishad. Shwetashvatara, bit difficult to pronounce, Upanishad, Shwetashvatara Upanishad. It belongs to Yajurveda, and it is not that old one, rather it is a later introduced Upanishad principle, right? So it discussed about the omniscient and omnipotent manifest form of the Brahman, right? So it discusses about the forms of Brahman, the omniscient form, and the omnipotent manifested form of the Brahman, right? So the Shwetashvatara Upanishad belongs to Yajurveda, and it's a later Upanishad which introduced later, and it emphasizes on the omniscient form of the Brahman and the omnipotent manifested form of the Brahman, right? So the 12th Upanishad that we are going to look at is the Kaushitaki Upanishad. Kaushitaki Upanishad, right? So it belongs to Rig Veda. It was introduced by a sage called Kaushitaki. And within this Upanishad principle, the breathing or prana is identified as the prime mover of the universe. The prana or breathing is identified as the prime mover within the universal. And apart from that, prana is identified as intelligent self, which is the ageless, immortal, and bliss. Right. So the simply Kaushitaki Upanishad, you don't have to remember everything. It belongs to Rig Veda. It was introduced by a sage called Kaushitaki. That is why that name was given. And it basically talks about the prana or breathing, and prana breathing is identified as prime mover within the prime factor within the universe, right? So those are the important points about the Kaushitaki Upanishad. And the final one that we are going to look at today is Maitri Upanishad, right? So there is another name for this specific Upanishad, which is Maitrayanya Upanishad, and it belongs to Yajurveda. And within the Maitri Upanishad, it was described or explained by a sage called Maitri. That's why that name was given to the specific Upanishad. And it talks about two kinds of Atman, phenomenal and the Bhutatman. Right. So it is also a Upanishadic principle which was developed later on, and also it describes about the a concept called Trimurti, which includes Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Which includes a concept called Trimurti, which includes Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So basically, Maitri Upanishad. Maitrayani Upanishad was another name to identify the same Upanishad, right? So it was introduced by a sage called Maitri. So that is why that name was given to this Upanishad. And basically it talks about two kinds of Atman. What are they? Phenomenal and Bhutatman. right? So when we talk about, so those are the main Upanishadic principles, right? So these Upanishadic period, right? So Upanishadic period or this facts which are containing within the Upanishadic really make a major turning point within the Indian thought, made a turning point within the Indian thought, right? So if we take as a summary, all these Upanishadic, if you take the themes of the Upanishadic principles, they basically talks about, one set talks about karma and samsara, or the cycle of life, and another set talks about Brahman and Atman, and there is another set which basically talks about the asceticism, right? So if we go through these Upanishadic principles, they talks about all the 13. They talks about several facts. One set talks about karma and samsara. The other set talks about Brahman and Atman, and there is another set which talks about the asceticism, right? So those are the main facts about the Upanishadic principles, right? So you don't have to remember everything, rather try to I know it's very difficult to remember every point here, even though you prepare a short note, or if you grab the most important points, the names aren't familiar, so it's not an easy task to remember everything, right? So if you could prepare a kind of short note, and I think I sent you the sample short note last week, right? So likewise, you could prepare accordingly. Based on your requirement, you could prepare a short note, whatever you want, and try to memorize the most important facts, right? So I have 10 questions now. I will read them now. I think you could note it down now, right? So, and these 10 questions are basically from these 13 Upanishadic principles, right? Entirely from these 13 Upanishadic principles, right? So you don't have to worry about other parts of the notes. Go through the 13 Upanishadic principles and write answers, right? The first one, name 3 Upanishad principles belong to Yajurveda. Name 3 Upanishad principles belong to Yajurveda. Right? So you have to put 1, 2, 3 and give examples, right? The second question, what is the most philosophical Upanishad? What is the most philosophical Upanishad amongst all? What is the most philosophical Upanishad amongst all? Question number 3. Name 4 stages described in Mandukya Upanishad. Name 4 stages, or else you could say status, right? Name 4 stages or status described in Mandukya Upanishad. Right? Okay. Question number 4. What are the five sheets, SHEATHS, 5 sheets described in Taittiriya Upanishad? What are the 5 sheets described in Taittiriya Upanishad? Question number 5. Aitareya Upanishad belongs to which Veda? Aitareya Upanishad belongs to which Veda? Question number 6. Name 2 Upanishad principles. Name 2 Upanishad principles which talk about Om sound. Question number 7. Some passages in the blank. It's a blank. Some passages in the blank. Upanishad is similar to Bhagavad Gita. Some passages in the blank Upanishad is similar to Bhagavad Gita. We talked about this last week, right? You have to fill.
It's okay, no problem. Continue, ma'am. Continue.
Sorry? Do you have any?
No problem.
Okay. Right. So, right, you have to fill that blank, right? Some passages in the blank Upanishad are similar to the Bhagavad Gita, right? The question number 8. Bradaranyaka Upanishad, Bhadaranyaka, Bradaranyaka Upanishad talks about 3 khandas or sections. Bradaranyaka Upanishad talks about 3 khandas or sections. What are they? Question number 9. What are the three within inverted commas DAs? What are the 3 DAs mentioned in the Yajnavalkya? What are the 3 DAs mentioned in the Yajnavalkya? We talked about this today. 3 DAs mentioned in Yajnavalkya, right? The final question, question number 10. What is the most poetic Upanishad? What is the most poetic Upanishad principle amongst all? What is the most poetic Upanishad principle amongst all? Right, so hope you all took all the questions down, right? So did you all hear all the questions? Any problems?
Okay.
Right. So Now it's 8:32, right? So you could take the time and you could go through the lecture notes, right? So and answer the questions, and you could either write the answers on a word format, or else you could answer in a kind of a paper. You could write the answers in hand and then send a photo to me, whatever convenient for you, right? So take your time and answer the questions, right? So right, so then I will end the meeting here. I'm waiting for your answers, and we will meet next week with the new lesson, right? So thank you for joining with me. Take your time and answer the questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
It's all these 10 questions are from Upanishad part 2.
Yeah, Upanishadic Principles is part 2.
Okay.
All the questions are from Upanishad. You don't have to worry about the other lecture materials. The Upanishadic principle only from the Upanishadic principles lecture note. Right. So thank you very much. Then answer the questions and send me the answers. Right. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.